Hey guys, it's Vivian the Somm Next Door. Welcome back to my channel. We are bringing it back to basics in this episode. So if you guys want a refresher or if you guys really would like to know what makes wines different, keep on watching. Now let's get into the winemaking process. So after you get the grapes, which there were so many different things that can impact these grapes, winemakers also have a lot of tools to impact the flavor of the wine. Some winemakers are allowed to chaptalize, which means they can add sugar to the wine because they need to meet a certain alcohol percentage. It's not really to make wine sweet. If you want to know how they make wine sweet, head over to my sweet wine video. So this usually happens in cooler regions like Canada, Germany, some parts of northern France. Then there's acidification, which is adding tartaric acid into the wine. So if the grape doesn't have enough acid in it, winemakers will add it to have more balance. So this actually sometimes happens in warmer regions like Australia, South Africa. So another decision that winemakers have to make is about the yeast. So on the grape, there is natural yeast. There's good and bad yeast, however. So the bad yeast can potentially spoil a wine, which is why a lot of winemakers put a little bit of sulfur dioxide in it to kill off all the bad yeast, good and bad yeast, and then they'll add their own yeast to the mix. I wouldn't say it's bad. It allows them to have more control over the fermentation process. But when you talk about natural wines, they will use the natural yeast on the grapes. So there's more volatility and they have to be more aware of what's going on or else the wine can spoil and it's harder to control. Another thing that winemakers can do is blend different varieties because different varieties will provide different taste profiles and aromas to a wine. The most famous example of that is champagne. A lot of champagnes are a blend of Chardonnay, which provides a lot of finesse, Pinot Noir, which provides structure, and then Pinot Meunier, which provides the fruity character. So a lot of champagnes will have all three of those grapes, or a combination in some ways. Another factor that people pay attention to is whether or not a wine has seen oak. Now, what does oak do to a wine? So oak has chemical compounds which changes the flavors and aromas of a wine. So oak will add a vanilla, a tobacco, like a sweeter flavor to the wine. And not all wines benefit from oak aging. Just because you hear oak aging does not mean you should be like, ooh, that is good. Because like for some wines that are super fruity and aromatic, maybe you don't wanna add vanilla to it. A lot of times white grapes are fermented in stainless steel tanks. So what that means is it's not gonna impart any aromas or flavors. Now there is a difference between barrel fermenting and barrel aging. Barrel fermenting is when they put the juice inside the barrel and it ferments inside the barrel, producing a wine, and then typically from there, it's aged in the barrel. When it says that it is barrel aged, that means it was usually fermented in stainless steel tanks and then put into a barrel to age. Why does this really matter? Mostly because it changes the flavor of the wine. So if it's barrel fermented, it's a softer texture. And also, if you think about it, if a winemaker is barrel fermenting a wine, it's gonna be more expensive because barrels are not cheap. A new French oak barrel costs $1,300, so it can be very pricey. Which is why some cheaper brands will use oak chips, oak blocks, and other substitutes and put it in the wine. It really is not the same as barrel aging. Other factors of a barrel is whether you use American oak or French oak. So American oak is less porous, so there's less oxygen coming through, and it imparts a stronger vanilla, almost coconut flavor to the wine, and it is less tannic. whereas French oak is more porous and imparts a stronger tannic flavor to the wine. Some winemakers will use new or old barrels. So if it's newly charred, that means there's gonna be a stronger flavor to it. Whereas if it is an older barrel, it will have less flavor. So by the time a barrel gets to its 4th use, it's basically very neutral, but it still has that oxygenation process in there. So there's still some benefit. Then there's also the fact that you can have a small barrel versus a large barrel, which if you think about it, large barrels have less oxygen going through it and then less surface area, so it's gonna impact it less. So there's all these little different factors for the barrel. It'll also, like I said, impact the cost of your wine. Other things that can change your wine, there's so many different things. It's like malolactic fermentation for white wines, for instance, like Chardonnay, which makes a wine less acidic and more buttery. So winemakers have a lot of different tools to change the wines. You guys have probably heard of like the term typicity. When people say typicity, it's like a region that has a certain style. For example, like Chablis. Chablis is 100% Chardonnay from northern Burgundy. It is grown in really chalky soil that's filled with all these like marine fossils in it. And because of that, it's known for high minerality and very like pure, like pear, citrus flavors and high acidity because it's grown in a cool climate. Lower tier Chablis are typically stainless steel, and then Grand Cru and some Premier Crus are oak aged. So Ravenel is one of the best producers in Chablis, and they are known for barrel fermenting. So, right, they put the juice into the barrel and then it turns into wine, and they extend the time of the wine on lees, so yeast cells, which gives it a much more breadier flavor. So that's his style of making wine. So that's why it's important to know both the region and the winemaker. So next time you guys go into a wine store, you guys are gonna see all these different types of wines. It's important to put in your mind, okay, these are cooler regions, these are warmer regions, and then within that, like what are the climates within each of them, right? Because like Australia is huge, but there are cooler regions within Australia and warmer regions with Australia. Same thing with California, same thing with France. And that's gonna tell you a little bit about the wine. Are the grapes gonna be riper, meaning there's gonna be more alcohol? Is it cool enough that it can produce enough acidity? What is this type of grape and what are the flavors that I expect to see from it? Is it a blend? How is it made? So those are all the factors when you drink a wine you should note, so that when you say, oh, I like this type of wine, you can tell your server or the store, oh, I like wines from a warmer climate. I like oak aged wines. I like wines with a little funkier flavor. So those are all different ways that you can ask your wine store owner and whoever, be like, this is what I want. Obviously, we could go into these topics at length. There are so much that we did not cover, but I hope you guys realize that there are so many different aspects that impact your wine. If you guys want to watch more, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel. And I don't have a wine glass, but cheers, you guys. I'll catch you guys later.